Welcome to worship from Nora Unitarian Universalist Church in Hanscom, Minnesota for Sunday, March 7th, 2021. We're glad you're here, however you're here, from your kitchen, your living room, your den, from across southern Minnesota or elsewhere in the country. Welcome. Our quintessential Smorg Food March Madness is underway. In just a moment, I'll tell you the foods that are moving on to round 2, but first I'll remind you it's not too late to send your completed bracket to either the church email address or street address to get in on the fun and be eligible for a fabulous food-related prize to be announced on April 1st. Vote for round 2 foods on or before Friday. You'll see a post on the Nora Facebook page. You can vote in the comments or you can email your votes again to the church office. The following foods, which are moving on to round 2, were in fact voted on by only 3 people, all of whom may or may not have been named day. So if you want to mix up the competition a little bit, you need to participate. Our round 1 winners are turkey, lefse, rosettes, herring, rice pudding, scrullers, tongue, and meatballs. If you are a dreamer, come in. If you are a dreamer, a wisher, a liar, a hoper, a prayer, a magic bean buyer, if you're a pretender, come sit with us, for we have some flax golden tales to spin. Come in, come in.
Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and mysteries of this great gift.
Even though we're far apart, I still invite you to sing together on this song. Bright Morning Star, with some new words and perhaps an unfamiliar melody. I'll sing it once through and then we'll try it together. Bright morning star, rise, and bright morning star, rise, and bright morning star, rise, and day is breaking in my soul. Let's try that. Bright morning star, rise, and bright morning star, rise, and bright morning star, rise, and day is breaking in my soul. Rise up from morning slumber, rise up from morning slumber, rise up from morning slumber. Day is breaking in my soul. Rise up and hear your calling, rise up and hear your calling, rise up and hear your calling. Day is breaking in my soul. Bright morning star, rise, and bright morning star, rise, and bright morning star, rise, and day is breaking in my soul. Oh, lift your voice to heaven, oh, lift your voice to heaven, oh, lift your voice to heaven. Day is breaking in my soul. We'll build this faith together, we'll build this faith together, we'll build this faith together. Day is breaking in my soul. Bright morning star, rise, and bright morning star, rise, and bright morning star, rise, and day is breaking in my soul. Day is breaking in my soul. Day is breaking in my soul.
Our story today, What We'll Build, Plans for Our Together Future, is written and illustrated by Oliver Jeffers. Mr. Jeffers was born in Belfast and now lives in Brooklyn. You'll notice that his illustrations show a white father and a white daughter. His notes at the front of the book say, "To my daughter Mari and Granny Marie, we have much to do." He also writes, "You are only free to dream and plan for the future when you are not battling to survive the present. To all those fathers and daughters on this orb whose odds are stacked less fortuitously than ours, our aim is to even the field. Love, Oliver and Mari. In remembrance of Oscar and Valeria, who tried and never made it across." What shall we build, you and I? Let's gather all our tools for a start. For putting together and taking apart. Let's build a door where there was none. We'll build a house to be our home. I'll build your future and you'll build mine. We'll build a watch to keep our time. We'll build some love to set aside and build a hole where we can hide. A fortress to keep our enemies out and higher walls for when they shout. But you don't always lose and you don't always win, so we'll build a gate to let them in. We'll build a table to drink our tea and say, "I'm sorry, me too, me three." We'll build a tower to watch the sky and other worlds that pass us by. Let's build a tunnel to anywhere. Let's build a road up to the moon. Let's build a comfy place to rest, for we'll be tired soon. Let's build a boat that can't be broken, that will not sink or be cracked open. A place to stay when all is lost, to keep the things we love the most. We'll put those favorite things beside the earlier love we set aside. I think that we may want them later, when times are hard and needs are greater. But first things first, let's build a fire, for we've planned a lot and now we're tired. It'll keep us warm like when we're born, then we'll say good night as all's all right. These are the things we'll build, you and I. Joy and woe are woven fine, wrote William Blake, and when this we rightly know, safely through the world we go. Because we daily live the truth in the poet's words, we pause each time we gather for worship wherever and however we gather to speak into the embrace of this beloved community, our joys and our sorrows. You may type your joys and sorrows into the comments along with the Facebook live stream. You may speak them aloud into the space you are in. You may hold them in your heart and know that in the mysterious ways of love and community, we hold them with you. It is a joy to mention some birthdays that have just passed or are here now. Scott Schmeezing, Edith Beckius, Dick Gurska, and Chrissy Schmidt. As the first anniversary of the pandemic's hold over our nation and the world comes in waves to different places, we have some joy with the approach of more full coverage of vaccines, and we have great sorrow for the lives lost, the lives disrupted. We celebrate the life and mourn the passing of one who grew up in our church, Gretchen Pepin. We hold Gretchen's husband Mike and daughter Britta, the whole Pepin family, the Schmeezings and the Blomquists in our love and care. Let us hold all our joys and sorrows, those spoken and those unspoken, in our hearts as we enter a spirit of meditation.
Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
When I breathe in,
I'll breathe in peace.
when I breathe out,
When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe
when I breathe out, I breathe out.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
When I breathe in,
I breathe in peace.
when I breathe
When I
out,
breathe out, I'll breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe
when I
in,
breathe out,
breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out.
Our first reading this morning from Simon Armitage, A Vision. The future was a beautiful place once. Remember the full-blown balsa wood town on public display in the Civic Hall? The ring-bound sketches, artists' impressions, blueprints of smoked glass and tubular steel, board game suburbs, modes of transportation like fairground rides or executive toys, cities like dreams cantilevered by light, and people like us at the bottle bank next to the cycle path, or dog walking over tended strips of fuzzy felt grass, or model drivers motoring home in electric cars, or after the late show strolling the boulevard. They were in the plans, all underwritten in the neat left hand of architects, a true legible script. I pulled that future out of the north wind at the landfill site, stamped with today's date, riding the air with other such futures, all unlived in and now fully extinct. Our second reading, An Old Story by Tracy K. Smith. We were made to understand it would be terrible. Every small want, every niggling urge, every hate swollen to a kind of epic wind, livid the land and ravaged like a rageful dream, the worst in us having taken over and broken the rest utterly down. A long age passed, when at last we knew how little would survive us, how little we had mended or built that was not now lost. Something large and old awoke. And then our singing brought on a different manner of weather. Then animals long believed gone crept down from trees. We took new stock of one another. We wept to be reminded of such color. Here end the readings. In westerns, scouts climb to the top of bluffs and scan the horizon for signs of trouble. In seafaring movies, the lookout stands in the crow's nest, sweeping the horizon for land or whales or pirates. Meditation teachers sometimes invite their students to soften their gaze and focus on a point in the middle distance, neither as close as their hands nor as distant as the opposite wall. And civil rights era activists, marchers, icons, and artists kept the movement on the move, inspired and in step with the song we just heard, particularly its refrain, "Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on, hold on." Each of these ways of looking, 3 out of countless others, serves the looker well in a particular situation. If you're out in the desert west of old-time movies, the landscape is both bleak and beautiful, offering few places to take shelter from weather or hide from the law or the bandits, whichever you fear most. So seeking high ground and scanning the horizon at regular intervals is both prudent and potentially life-saving. If you're on a sailing ship on the high seas, rescue from any misfortune is unlikely, and danger lurks both under the surface and atop the water. So again, a lookout in a high place, scanning the horizon, is prudent and potentially life-saving. And when long weeks and months are spent at sea in tight quarters, with limited fresh food or water, then spying land from the crow's nest might be life-saving in a different but just as real sense. When we're meditating, allowing our attention to focus on objects or physical surroundings can distract us. Closing our eyes might facilitate our dropping into a meditative state, or it might facilitate dropping into a sleeping state. Gazing into the middle distance makes sense as a means of optimizing the meditation experience. And if we have an important goal, something we want to achieve, a change we want to effect, if there is a future we want to build, keeping our eyes on the prize, that is to say, our attention narrowly and intently focused on the desired outcome, is often the single most powerful approach toward accomplishing the transformed state of affairs we believe necessary or beneficial to ourselves, our family, our community. I left one kind of focus out of my sermon title for today. Well, I left many kinds of focus out of my sermon title, but just one that I need to bring into the list right now. Governing boards of organizations are advised to avoid rear-view mirror leadership practices. That means that board meetings should not be devoted primarily to reviewing reports about what has happened in the past month, but should rather be devoted to hearing the plans each segment of the organization is currently working on for the coming months. Because the future of the organization lies ahead in the unfolding of whatever plans the committees and departments and individual leaders have in place, not behind in yesterday's news. As one of the pre-civil rights era lyrics for the song we just heard said, "When you plow, don't lose your track. Can't plow straight and keep a looking back." The prize, the middle distance, the horizon, the rear view mirror. Unfortunately, while it's easy for me to differentiate between situations and the type of focus appropriate to each when I'm writing a sermon, life is much more complex, let's just say messier, than sermon writing. And life over the last year has been just about as messy as it comes. A year ago this weekend, we didn't have a church service. We had a handful of joint Zoom-based services with the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Mankato over the next few months. It would be summer before we met physically to worship in the churchyard, fall before we again worshipped in the sanctuary, physically distant from one another, with pews roped off, no coffee hour, no shaking hands, no hugging, no responsive reading or unison recitation of the words for extinguishing the chalice. And then we stopped meeting in person again. No last session of our Community Ed series on the end of life last March. No last community meal in Hanska last March and April. Just as those meals had been picking up steam. No 2020 smorg, no solstice ritual and Flandreau. An annual meeting held in two parts, one virtual, one in person, separated from each other by a couple of months. We've been socializing on Zoom, worshiping on Facebook Live and sometimes Zoom, mourning deaths via phone calls and notes rather than hugs and shared meals. Messy, inadequate, and the best we know how to do under the circumstances. That's just church life. Our personal lives have been just as messy, probably messier. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, graduations, retirements, celebrations of all kind postponed, moved into cyberspace, observed by smaller than usual groups of masked people outdoors, sitting at separate tables. Businesses we frequent or work in or own shut down temporarily or permanently. Vacation plans canceled. Kids and spouses in our space and in our face all the time. Long and even now continuing separations from other loved ones, the ones we don't live with. Groceries purchased online. People we know falling ill and dying. Our own COVID scares or illnesses and all the rest. I don't need to itemize any more of the messiness. We've all been living it in unique yet universal ways. Then there's our national life. A year ago, the pandemic had already, in fact, been underway for several months, had we but known. And let's face it, part of the reason we didn't know was because the administration of the former president had long before then given up any pretense of truth-telling, following science, or caring about the needs of the populace at large. Then came May, with another cop murdering another black man in another street, this one close to home, unleashing a racial uprising. And those events, the murder and the uprising in Minneapolis, would do a couple of things of significance, at least a couple of things. Give the administration an excuse to double down on lies and hate and violence against the people, and call into national view the police murder of Breonna Taylor that had happened back in March of last year, reminding us that George Floyd's murder was far from an isolated tragedy, and moving the uprising from Minneapolis to cities across the country. Then came the election season, and then came January 6th, and the lies and violence piled on top of lies and violence. And all the while, 500,000 people in this country were dying from coronavirus. At this level, The messiness gave way to chaos. Here we are, a year from the beginning of our public awareness, absorbing positive news of recent days and weeks, 3 vaccines, smoothing out and ramping up vaccine efforts, downward trends in cases and deaths, though that seems to have stalled. A new administration that seems to rely on science, value truth-telling, believe in restoring America's standing in the world, and care about the people it serves. An administration acting to reverse some of the worst policies of the prior one as quickly as it can. Even yet, just about every aspect of our lives, personally, at the church and at the national or global level, still wavers between messy and chaotic. Nevertheless, poised here today, between the start of meteorological spring last Monday and astronomical spring on March 20th, today folks are eager to look beyond these past long months toward whatever the future holds, toward what so many are calling a new normal. I'm not wild about that phrase, but it works for today as a shorthand for ordinary life no longer dictated by precautions for avoiding death. We're eager to look toward a new normal, and we're eager to not just know what the future holds, but to shape that future and plan our way actively into it. Alas, life isn't messy only in hard times. It's messy in the best of times. And it's certainly messy in the in-between times. And our ideas about the new normal are messy too. Now, the need and the effort and the plans of our new administration and our congressional leaders to forge a new normal for our country are more than I can include in this sermon, but they're part of the messiness going forward, just as they are part of the past and present messiness. As for the other levels, our personal lives, our community life, our church life, you remember. Back in the early days of the pandemic, once the initial shock of relocating from office to home in the blink of an eye wore off, many people loved telecommuting, not having to get dressed, not having to leave the house. Employees and employers both declared this change might become permanent. Cost-effective, time-effective, improved productivity and morale. But now, almost daily stories and articles abound about Zoom fatigue. So what's the new normal going to be? The old 9-to-5 routine? The new Zoom routine? Something completely different? Some kids have thrived on distance learning or hybrid schedules, teaching us what we should have known all along, that one-size-fits-all education doesn't cut it, and we should not default back to it even when safe to do so. But teachers, many of whom are also parents, all of whom are underpaid and under-resourced, have suffered disproportionate stress and should not be expected to continue to shoulder that burden as part of any new normal. Zoom family gatherings in between physical reunions in one geographic location. That's a new normal that might continue to strengthen familial and multi-generational ties. Never returning to physical reunions in one geographic location again. That has no place in the new normal I'm interested in living. Online grocery shopping, I'll gladly continue to integrate into my new normal. And I want our newfound appreciation for essential workers, from hospital housekeepers to delivery drivers, bank clerks to first responders, and medical and nursing personnel, and all in between. I want our appreciation for these essential workers to become embedded in our new normal and signified as essential by the addition of adequate compensation and benefits. I want to return to parades and community gatherings in the new normal, and I want widespread, perhaps universal vote by mail to continue and to be incorporated into a new normal. And I want in-person church. But even figuring out that part of post-pandemic life isn't straightforward. As much as we've missed the potlucks and the hugs and the hymn singing and the communal silences that aren't silent, but are all the more holy for the rustling and the sighing and the coughing, as much as we've missed all that in our beloved space together, online church and regular online chat sessions have allowed Nora members and friends far distant from Brown County to participate in the life of the church, such as it is these days. And folks who don't drive, and folks who never were in-person churchgoers here and may never be, but who found spiritual nourishment, solace, connection here in these strange times. How will a new normal for Nora Church serve all of us in all our varied needs? And though a consideration for another day, what will a new normal without full-time professional ministry at Nora Church encompass? The prize, the middle distance, the horizon, the rearview mirror. Poised, as I said, between two different first days of spring, approaching Easter, a few weeks off, and the season of new life, as the end of the necessity for strict health and safety protocols comes ever closer, though not yet here. Are we today called to imagine and plan our way into the future by keeping our eyes on the prize, or on the middle distance, or on the horizon? Must we avoid the rearview mirror at all costs? There is, I believe, usefulness and value in all these ways of directing our attention, whether we're talking about our personal lives, our family lives, the life of Nora Church, or the life of our country. We need to scan the horizon for signs of danger or heavy weather, or solid ground upon which we might safely land, or fresh water sources that might quench our thirst for justice, our thirst for lives of work and leisure, learning and celebrating. Once we discern our highest aspirations and deepest dreams for the future, we need to keep our eyes on those prizes lest we lose our way or become distracted. But sometimes we need to soften our gaze, bring it to the middle distance, giving ourselves the opportunity to listen again to our spirits and to our community, to consider whether our plans still reflect our highest aspirations and deepest dreams, or if some realignment might be in order. And sometimes, dare I say, We might even need to glance in the rearview mirror. Seeing where we've been and how we got here can also help us plot our way into the future, the new normal. And so I'm reminded of what I learned in driver's education, that the driver's eyes should move between what's happening directly in front of the vehicle and what's happening farther out. Move from left to right, scanning neighboring lanes. Glance into the rearview mirror from time to time to see what's approaching, and then back to what's happening in front of the vehicle. Shifting back and forth among these several and other ways of gathering information and focusing our attention and efforts seems to me the surest, most likely way toward lives that are full, meaningful, and doable, as life hasn't really been for a long, long time, much longer than just the past year. Sweeping from the prize to the horizon, from the middle distance to the rearview mirror and around again, will reveal our history, patterns, mistakes, and triumphs. Will show us trends or obstacles while they are still a ways off, giving us time to react. Will allow us space for reflection and imagination. Will keep us headed toward the goal we want to claim. A long time ago, Jim Ed Poole and Dale Connolly on the morning show on Minnesota Public Radio did a bit about the future historians of America, preparing for tomorrow's yesterday today. Of course, we all do that every day. But Simon Armitage, in one of today's readings, suggests that as a deliberate stance, such an approach is futile. The future was a beautiful place once. I pulled that future out of the north wind at the landfill site, stamped with today's date, riding the air with other such futures, all unlived in and now fully extinct. From where and when we now dwell, it is easy to grasp the truth in that poem. A once beautiful future, well, for some of us, beautiful. A once beautiful future is now all unlived in and fully extinct. That reality would be pretty discouraging, except for a different truth that Tracy K. Smith offers in another of today's readings. We were made to understand it would be terrible. When at last we knew how little would survive us, how little we had mended or built that was not now lost, something large and old awoke, and then our singing brought on a different manner of weather. Then animals long believed gone crept down from trees. We took new stock of one another. We wept to be reminded of such color. As I said, we can't help but prepare for tomorrow's yesterday today. Indeed, that's what the whole sermon has been about. But we can refuse to believe the lie, refuse to believe both the lies. The one that the future is a beautiful place, the other that the future will be terrible. And thus we may choose to claim a future that, though messy, is ours, and begin to live our way into it with hearts and minds and spirits fixed unwaveringly on the prize, on the middle distance, on the horizon, and on the rearview mirror. Amen. Let's say in unison the words for extinguishing our chalice. The flame has been doused. The fire of our community still burns. In this moment, we become beacons on the prairie, bearers of light and warmth until we gather again to rekindle our communal chalice. And now, beyond the power of any spoken word, may the Spirit do its persuasive work in our hearts, our minds, and our bodies, that we may go our ways in openness and love, charged with new creative energy and at peace. Amen.